Hey everyone, this is the bonus content for my research review on foot stretcher height in Volume 3, Issue 2 of Science Rowing. To give everyone context, I reviewed 5 articles on foot stretcher height and the impact it has on rowing biomechanics and performance. All 5 studies have similar findings. Increasing foot stretcher height has the ability to increase force potential, but that same adjustment may negatively impact the length of the stroke or alter where stress is placed on the body. Research is limited on the subject, which makes practical experience that much more valuable. And that's why we're joined by Julian Stephanski.
Hey, how's it going?
Julian, thanks for joining us. Julian joins us to discuss his recent exploration into higher foot stretcher heights and the impact it's had on his rowers' performance and health. Julian's a performance and injury consultant for multiple teams at Marin Rowing and a performance coach in San Francisco. Julian has an extensive rowing background, having coached at Pacific, the Penn AC Junior Gold Program, and Marin Rowing. Let's move right into the questions. Julian, you've been experimenting with higher foot stretcher heights for a while now. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got here and why did you start experimenting with higher foot stretcher heights?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Blake. I work at a gym in San Francisco called J Body Works. I'm at Marin Rowing and work with rowers within that context. And I work with a lot of different people. And the impetus for my experimenting with foot stretcher heights came from 2 people. The first person, his name is Jason. He's my boss at J Body Works. He's our owner and founder. He's had a massive influence on my coaching style. And then my athletes at Marin Rowing, who I kind of experimented with and saw them, getting better and sometimes worse performance with foot stuff. So, Jay, my boss, has taught me a lot about anatomy and really specifically about how to keep the weight in the center of the foot inside of a principle that we call ankle point. Basically, where your shin hits your foot, is the strongest part of your foot. There's a bone there called the talus. It's really, really important for like healthy gait function, for squatting heavy weights, for deadlifting heavy weights. And I was always bringing to him, people really want to get more power in rowing. He said, oh, well, you should start with the feet. It's like a logical place to start. If you want to put power through your legs, your foot might need to have sound biomechanics. And what he presented me to was, hey, when you're up at the catch, your heels are up. Why is that? He's like, I've never seen rowing before. Just tell me. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, like, that's just kind of how I did it and how it was done. And all the times I've ever seen rowing, that's how it looks. He goes, well, what if like we just change the feet? Why is it so far away from the chain? Why aren't the feet up way high where the chain is? So I mean, really, it's because you kind of lean forward that way. You wouldn't want your feet to be in the way of that. And he said, well, let's just try it. And I threw him up there. I'd never put him that high before. He said, yeah, use this bone, push. And my splits were as good as they ever were when I was competing, 10, 15 years ago. And I was like kind of out of shape at the time. I was like a little surprised at the numbers I could just hit much more easily using my legs that way. So that kind of was the beginning of the light bulb moment.
And how long ago was that?
Oh, that was like mid-quarantine. That was like, April, May, June of 2020. We weren't coaching any rowing. And he and I were kind of the only people we each saw outside of our households that would come into the gym, wear gloves to open the door of the gym and like come in and hang out with him. And it was just like, hey, we have this time, this space. Can you help me look at rowing? And he really did. Sent me on this whole path of changing things.
Awesome. So when you're on the erg, are you talking about just taking it as high as possible? What kind of like foot height are you talking about?
Yes. It really, sometimes we like to say it depends on the athlete, what they're ready for, what their coach will allow, what they're interested in. If they don't ask me any questions about getting more powerful, if they just ask me about specific thing, I'll address it. But they say, how do you coach rowing? What's your system? Blah, blah, blah. I say, oh, I love high feet. I love high feet because you're pushing the boat towards the start line. Hopefully you're locked into the water, so the boat actually just stays still. And you're pushing yourself and the boat directly, horizontally towards the finish line where you want to go. I found that the lower the feet go, you're pushing the boat under the water and yourself in the air a little bit. So if you bring them up real, real high, you're getting this nice horizontal torque of foot to handle. And that was what Jay was asking at the beginning. Why is there this vertical distance foot to handle, when really you want a strong horizontal shearing force to go your fastest and produce a lot of power. So I go all the way up for myself. I go all the way up for most of my athletes. Sometimes they'll come back to me and say, hey, I can't do it. It's too uncomfortable, or my knees are in the way, my hips are in the way. I say, great, drop it a little bit. Do what you need to do to feel comfortable, but find your flat foot as soon as you can on the drive. And bringing it higher helps them find the foot flat sooner.
Awesome. I think there's so much that we can bring from the sports performance or like movement or anatomy world to improve the sport of rowing. And I see that as something that you're doing here. So that's awesome. We make rigging adjustments in the hopes of enhancing rowing performance. Do higher foot stretcher heights increase 2K performance in your experience?
Yeah, so for me, what I've seen is it definitely increases the amount of power that rowers can put into their legs. And if in the system they're operating in, more leg strength is beneficial, yes, it will help them. I find that a lot of rowers are really, really good at using their back and their back muscles. That's why so many rowers have a lot of fatigue, pain, or even injuries in their back, because they're using their back a lot. That's where force breaks down for them. And putting more of that force into their feet and legs tends to give them better performance in the micro scale, in that they can pull at least the same splits they're pulling or faster. And it also helps their performance in the macro scale, where they spend a little less time injured. Their backs don't take quite as much load because the emphasis goes into the feet and the legs. Even from the language you use as the coach, you're saying the word legs a lot. You're saying the word feet a lot. You're presencing them to the lower body. And just that focus and attention through different joints is going to put more load there.
Is that a performance gain that you see immediately, or does it take practice and time to kind of adjust to that new form?
It definitely takes practice. I personally found it immediately, which is one of the reasons that it didn't take a lot more convincing besides that first day with Jay for me. But other people, I've had people who have broken 550 on a 2K before and been on national teams and, won medals at many different levels, try it and say, hey, that feels different. I noticed what you're saying, but also I was really good before the other way. Are you sure that this isn't going to be too big a change? And it's a negotiation with every athlete. They say like, oh, I need some time to get used to this before I wholesale adopt it. Everyone's at a different spectrum of how much change they're looking for. I've had other people say, oh, my coach isn't going to allow me to change the foot stretchers. I row at a high school or a college team where, those things aren't in my domain to change. I say, great, doesn't matter. You can leave it where it is, but just start to think about when your foot gets flat, that's the strongest time. So it does take some adjusting.
One of the studies I did look at, they basically did 3 weeks of familiarization where they gave them 15 minutes. I think it was maybe twice a week, just to experience a higher foot plate. And over that 3-week span, they saw that their power output continued to increase. So I think if we're not someone like you who like sees this immediate feedback of like feeling more powerful and being comfortable with that change, maybe allowing yourself time to experiment might be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Also have people do a lot of experimentation off their erg, just with where their foot is placed on the ground, or, having them put their foot horizontally out on a wall and say, push away from the wall, only use your toes. Don't let your heel touch the wall. And they push and it's like, oh, okay, now put your heel on the wall and kick. If you were going to kick down a door, would you use only your toes or would you use your whole foot? I've also heard coaches use the analogy of jumping. When you jump, how do you jump high? Well, you bend and squat a little bit. You have your entire foot flat, and then you push. When you reach extension, you go onto your toes, right? And that's how jumping works. You would never keep your heel completely off the floor, squat down on just your toes and try to jump. It would be totally unstable and wobbly. Or doing a heavy back squat on just your toes would be really difficult. You would want a flat foot to uptake the most power. And that is just like a basic premise. Your bit about experimentation in 15-minute increments totally works, totally tracks with like the athletes might need some time to fool with it and see if they can get comfortable first.
When people think about higher foot stretcher heights, they get worried about how it's going to affect the rest of their stroke. So I think a lot of coaches and, me personally as well, they're like, well, if I do that, I'm going to lose length. And all the research shows the same thing too, where it's like it does increase performance, but it comes at a cost of length. What's your experience? Are you able to have both, or are you losing something?
So when I look for length, I look for length at the blade. And when I do this change with the rower, I look for, on the erg, I look for length at their handle. So what I'll do is I'll film in exactly the orientation we are now, right? With the screen here and the erg behind me. And I'll have them row 10 strokes, completely organic, no changes at all. And film it, I show it to them, I say, great, what I want you to look at is this, this, and this. Change the speed all the way up, do it again, 10 strokes, 20 strokes. And I compare the two videos. Where does their handle land? You can see here the word concept on the machine. Does their handle land at the O in concept? Does it land at the P? Does it get all the way out to the cage if you're really reaching far? And I'll change their footboard height up, and the handle will get within an inch of where it was before. And they'll say, oh, I feel short. It feels, which is really important for their confidence and style. They feel short. And I'll say, well, you're sitting more upright, so that could be responsible for that feeling because your head doesn't tilt as far forward, right? That can feel short. But if you look at the handle in the boat, the blade, is the blade or handle any less long, which is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? If the blade is going the same distance back, you didn't lose or gain any length. You just exchanged which body part is shifting. Are you shifting the chest or are you shifting the knee? And as long as the blade is the same distance, you didn't truly lose length, where I believe it matters with the blade and the boat.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Just to let everyone know, Julian and I did have lunch and he explained this to me before, so it's not all brand new to me, but that totally surprised me when he told me that. So Julian, in this study where they looked at single scullers, they said they lost 3 degrees at the catch, and they said they lost 1.46 inches on leg drive, which to me seems pretty minor. Obviously, we'd love to have both, but if you're open to it, do you think you could kind of demo like what a normal stroke would look like and then what a stroke would look like when you're looking at higher foot stretcher heights?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak to one thing about that, about the losing degrees. I do also coach them to bend their knees more. I do have them make up some of the length in compression at the knee. So, but I'll illustrate that now.
Yeah, that's a good point, because in this research, they weren't coaching them to change anything. They just changed the foot stretcher height and saw the impact. So if we're able to coach them into a better position, we might not even lose the length.
Right. I totally agree that the change doesn't happen in a vacuum. When you alter the foot mechanics, yes, things trickle upstream and it's going to look different. So I'll start with how I used to row in high school and college. For most of my career, I was at a 3, but for a while I was getting coached to get a ton of body over. This was like late in high school. We were actually doing pretty well. And I went all the way down to 4 and even 5 sometimes. So we'll start at 4. It's, most of the way down with maybe room for a little more. Okay. And so going from the back end, you might have somebody start out, get pivot here, right? If you've got really tight hamstrings, I'll have athletes just soften the knees a little bit so they can pivot at the femur right here in the hip socket. And then they would row. And they do a lot of body swing out, right? This would be a pretty conventional American style, extended. I can get almost to the cage if I really stretch myself a little bit and let my heels come off. So I'd say this is pretty similar to what I used to do in high school and college, okay? And the place where I started to look was here, I'm at the catch and I'm on my toes. And, body's certainly over, a little bit round in the spine, shoulders out. And it took me until there to have my foot flat. And I would say that this is just past half slide, somewhere between half and quarter slide. And a lot of my power's already gone. I'm just beginning to start to swing there. And I really only have a strong foot connection with a whole foot for the back half of the drive. The entire early part, I'm just sort of squeezing to try to get my heels down. So as we go up, we'll start to see the foot go down sooner and sooner. I like to do some single leg rowing too. You can compare one to the other. But before, I was getting my heels all the way down at half slide and still doing the same technique of deep body over, shoulder extension. Say I go to about here from the finish. I still got my pivot, soft in the knees. I feel my femur rotating, and I'm here at the catch. I'm almost hitting the front, but you can see I'm a little tighter. It's harder for me to stay up there. So that's what you're talking about, losing length. But as I push down, boom, my foot is flat now, and I'm definitely farther forward. I would say I'm in front of half slide when I can now begin to push my entire foot. And just that in a complete vacuum, I will generate more power into the footboard, regardless of anything else. So I'll row that out a little bit. Same style, pivot over, heels. And I can feel so much more power right as my heel clicks in, and the swing starts much earlier too. So I'm starting to open the body as soon as that heel comes down, and that's happening before half slide. And so also shift the power curve to the left. If you're a power curve coach, if you love looking at those, that peak on the y-axis will start to shift to the left as you get your heel down sooner. Okay. Now, the rigging change that you were talking about, feeling tight, where I'm here and it's like, oh, my knees are up in my belly. I can't get a full breath. It's pretty uncomfortable. I don't feel like I can reach all the way to the cage anymore. Where can I get more length with these higher feet? And the answer for me was sitting pretty straight up and starting to close this window underneath the hamstring and calf right there to get myself all the way up. So I get more length from the legs and I take away a little bit of length from the body. And even at the finish, I'll tend to sit straight up there. And now I can get to the cage and I can still shove my feet down really hard.
Yeah, it looks like you're getting a similar reach now with that little adjustment.
Yeah, exactly. And so now I just let my knees begin to fill the space that my chest has abdicated. Right? I've just exchanged. The handle being here, I can have a lot of back stretch and minimal leg bend, or I can have a lot of leg bend and a little less back stretch, but the handle doesn't move, right? The blade is the same length back by the backstay, but I'm just exchanging which body part is doing the loading. And then I just shove through the heels to, wedge open the stroke is how I like to say it. I'm wedging my heels against the blade.
Nice. Yeah. So I see that similar reach. I see the earlier, like much clearer on how early you can get that entire foot down.
Yeah, it's a good time to go back into one other athlete I had. I'll shout him out. His name is Patrick Consonan. He was a Marin guy and an under 23 athlete, Princeton athlete. And he was coming to me around the same time as Jay and saying, hey, I got this problem. I row with my feet all the way up, but the toes fold over the top like this and bend the flanges. And I was like, yeah, that's interesting. And he rowed super funky. I never seen anybody said, do you have anything, he's asking me, that we could put behind it, like a plank of wood or like something to bolster that? Because what was happening is he pushed so hard, his toes would fall down over the top. I said, I don't have anything like that, but I would totally consider it. And when I connected with Jay, he said, if you put the foot stretchers where the chain is, you could just stomp the heck out of it and make your feet do so much more work. And those two independent parties suggesting this to me really blew my mind. They were saying the same thing of just how do you get your feet to more effectively torque horizontally against the handle. And then the last notable example is the Irish lightweights, Paul O'Donovan and I forget the other brother's name, but the Irish national lightweights won the gold medal in Tokyo, silver medalist in Rio. Anytime I've seen them on the machines on erging, their feet are all the way up. So another group of people who I haven't picked their brain about it, but I see them doing it.
Interesting. Oh, thanks for that like super detailed visual. I think that's really going to help people to see that. You brought up another concern is like the erg's not made to do this comfortably, right? So we have to kind of shift the thought process enough that people are able to either like add some sort of thing to change the erg, or maybe there's some sort of adaptation that they can do with boats and ergs to make it easier to customize.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some foot stretcher models in the boat have a little turn key or a little screw right in between the feet that you can, I think Hudson, you can kind of unscrew, slide it up, and then tighten back in. I remember learning to row as a novice at Pacific, and we had these pococs that had the erg foot stretchers in them. Those I think are banned by U.S. rowing, definitely not for competition because they don't have the heel ties. But if you could adjust it on the water, I would say, and it's within your ability to do so, put them higher and see what happens.
The other thing with the erg is like if you go too high, the strap is also moving like down your foot, right? Does that cause issues?
Yeah, I keep them loose. If you
Okay.
have them tight, you won't be able to lift off. You'll feel them, it'll cut into your foot a little bit. The other thing I do with it is I usually have people in shoes because that will further boost their foot up a little bit and give them a lot of stability in the shoes they're used to. I know a lot of people really love barefoot or erging in socks, but I much prefer the shoes because it's just very comfortable for a given athlete. I know some athletes who have foot issues or flat feet or insoles. I try to have the shoes on so they can get further stability and comfort to use their feet. But
Awesome.
yeah, in
So
terms of rigging, there's definitely stuff to consider for each individual.
okay, cool. So if you're gonna try this on the erg, shoes and loose straps.
Shoes and loose straps, and and also at the finish, if you're falling out, there's other things to look at the back end of the stroke. But in terms of the catch and leveraging your legs, yeah, you'll probably get a little more push.
Really glad you gave us that visual again, because when I was visualizing it before you showed me, my initial concern was, okay, you're gonna jack their feet up and then they're just gonna round their back excessively and place a ton of stress on their back. And you're actually showing that the spine's staying in a pretty strong position.
Yeah, yeah. It was another piece of it is that I wanted less back injuries, and the more load you can put to the legs, even if you go the same exact split, if you have no change in power, but your spine is less round, you probably get less back injuries, even by a small percentage. A kind of meta discussion, like zooming way out. I think a lot about rowers is the tortoise and the hare, where rowers are always trying to win the entire race in one workout. And every workout is like that, and they just beat it down. And I said, well, when January comes around and everybody's injured and we're all sick and tired of being sick and tired, we'll wish we had maybe eased up a touch. And I think about that a lot, where to train like a tortoise means you only need to get a little bit better every day, not a lot. And you don't need to make all your changes at once. You can do small stuff and let it accumulate over time. And I found that this way, people have less back pain and probably need to spend less time out of practice or taking days off. And even if this was less effective, but people got less injured, it'd be worth it. It'd be worth it to gain an additional month of training over the course of a year where you didn't have to take time off with back pain. And that was another thing of like, could this be more sustainable?
And you've had athletes come to you with back pain, and this adjustment's actually helped their back pain, right?
Yeah. So my one guy who was a senior team athlete going around 550 and trying to make a comeback to the national team, he had herniated discs in high school. He rehabbed them, herniated them again, post-collegiate and senior team rowing, and he couldn't row at all. He was just swimming. He was like, I'm swimming until I can do enough PT or have something work for me. And I said, well, let's do your rehab. We did some rehab on him. He felt a lot better. We decreased his pain a ton. And I said, here's the thing is you'll go back and row the exact same way you've always rowed, the way that got you injured, until you change the root movement pattern, the thing that hurt you, until you change your rowing, it's not going to get better. And he was like, well, nobody rows this way. My coach isn't going to let me, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you don't have a coach right now because your back is broken. So if you can row this way and train and not get hurt, what would be possible? I said, oh, well, if I wasn't hurt, I could I could race again. I say, great. Like, is it worth changing your technique so you can train? And he was like, yeah, it is. It is worth it to change so I can keep training without pain. And I find a lot of athletes late in their careers will butt up against that. They'll say, well, I can train hard for like 4 or 5 months and then my back just goes sour. And I say, well, is it worth changing your stroke if you can row without pain? And sometimes they'll say yes, and other times they'll be like, nah, I'll manage it. And we do. There's more than one way to go. But athletes who got into chronic back pain, I was just looking to stabilize their feet, stabilize their lumbar spine, stabilize their pelvis, get them to something they could sustain.
That's so huge because back pain ends so many rowing careers. Like if this can actually be a way to reduce stress on the back and allow them to continue to row, that could be a game changer for the sport.
Yeah. But then you and I won't have jobs anymore. We won't have anyone to fix.
The other thing, so after the back concern for me, the other thing was like, okay, well, now we're adjusting the biomechanics. Maybe we're getting a little bit more knee flexion. Maybe we're putting more pressure at the ankle or the hips. Are you seeing this translate into extra stress or injuries elsewhere?
Not yet. The only time I've had a concern for it is that I had a torn right meniscus in my knee. I tore it twice. Once when I was 12 playing football, and then again when I was 25 playing ultimate frisbee. So both times I was in cleats and my knee just had too much torque on it. When I go for a long time or really hard, or I'm not doing my stretches to warm up, I'll get a little discomfort in my knee. So I'd say an athlete with any major knee reconstruction, which is super common, ACL, MCL, PCL, or meniscus, I would just say, let your pain be your guide. If it hurts, don't do it. If it hurts, make a change. If it hurts, tell your coach. As to a lot of stuff that you've written about, like if you see something, say something, and stay with your stretching. Take care of your body, and your brain is usually trying to tell you something if it hurts.
Is there a way to know what height is correct? Do you think you can go too high? Is the answer somewhere in the middle, or is it all depending on the athlete in front of you?
Ooh, it's all depending on the athlete in front of me, but I have not yet seen it where it's too high. That being said, if you're rowing in a crew of 8 and you start doing something weird and outlandish that no one else is doing, it may not make the boat go faster. Right? But if you're treating yourself as an individual on your erg, where you're responsible for your scores, and you can find a way to go faster that helps you out, why not? A lot of athletes come to know that rowing on the water and rowing on the erg can be done slightly differently, right? The way to go fastest on the erg is to thrash like an animal and go insane, and you can have great splits. But that doesn't work on the water. Right? You have to row together. You have to have timing and flow and be gentle at times. So I would just say that erging is different than rowing on the water. I know some coaches don't think that, or that you're using one to practice for the other. But if your goal is to produce more power on this machine, you can definitely do it with higher feet.
As of now, Julian, I feel like what you're doing is pretty rare. What do we need to see change in the sport that would make this like a realistic change?
Yeah, I think that talking about it, rowing, when I remember, is that you weren't supposed to be discussing rowing with other parties outside your own team. Your coach would tell your team what to do, and then you never talk to the other team or coach. You don't even look at them. They don't exist. You try to make your boat go fast, and you just stay here. And there's no discussion or ideas or whatever. We're just trying to win. And you don't talk about erg scores. You don't talk about your training techniques. You don't want anyone to find out about your super secret training plan that makes you fast. And I think that we're changing that a lot. You and me, as well as the world of social media. I never watched people in Australia or Holland row. Now I can every minute of the day. I can watch national team training, and I can listen to your buddies Joe with the Portuguese national team. Like, that's so cool that we can just share this information. And all it takes is for people to watch and nerd out and discuss and talk about what they see. And it'll all get better. It doesn't need to be this way or any other way, but being willing to share information and talking to our community is the way forward.
Well, thank you for sharing with us and being a part of that. Yeah, with Science of Rowing, we found that sometimes people will be like, well, that doesn't work for me. And we're like, that's okay. What we want to do is we want to stimulate thought. And like, if we give you an idea that works perfect, like cookie cutter, that's awesome. But I think that what we do better than anything is just get people to think differently. And maybe that will help you, find something that works well for your team. Anything you'd like to share before we go?
Yeah, I guess I'll plug, if that's okay. I'll plug myself. I'm
Of
Julian
course.
Stephanski. Find me on Instagram, julian.stephanski. My gym is called J Bodyworks, the letter J, Bodyworks, all one word. We're in San Francisco. We're doing virtual sessions just like this. And you can come in person if you're in the Bay Area. And yeah, love connecting with your group. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for everything you shared. I think this is super valuable and, again, thought provoking. We'll have all of the contact info in the details below. So feel free to find that if you want to get in contact with Julian. Thanks again, Julian.
Thanks, Blake.